Hey everyone, this is Kristen and I am coming to you from the car today. So this will be fun. I've never done a video like this before. Um, so today I just wanted to give you a very general, high level view of my diagnostic journey. I might go into a little anecdote here and there, but I want to keep it as high level as possible, just because if I go into too much detail, this will be a really long video, and I might make this into two parts. We'll see how it goes. But I wanted to do this just for those who are on the diagnosis journey, whatever you want to call it. You're trying to figure things out. I'm still there with you, but I just want this to maybe be helpful for anybody that can maybe find a nugget here or there that that could help them in their journey. So anyways, I'm gonna put a list of my current diagnoses in the description, so that if you want to look into those further, you can. I was going to originally kind of break this up into separate videos for each diagnosis, but then I realized I personally have a really hard time distinguishing okay, what is migraines and what's EDS, and what symptom belongs to what, and I feel like that could get really confusing and potentially not helpful. So I'm just gonna kind of talk about my symptoms kind of as they developed. So taking it way back to childhood, as I think many people in this chronic illness realm have experienced, I had a lot of things going on in my childhood. Not a lot, I wouldn't say a lot, but just things that just didn't make sense. And for so for example, I had joint pain, significant joint pain, especially during my teenage years, and it was kind of attributed to growing pains, but I was so convinced that I had arthritis as a teenager, and it was just one of those weird things. Always had digestive issues, but that was so normalized for me, and I think also because I had constipation all the time. I was very gassy. There was a certain level of shame there. So those weren't things I necessarily talked about, but I also kind of thought that was normal and everybody experienced those, so I didn't think much of that. I'm looking at my notes here because I'm trying to not leave out the little hints along the way, but there was this one point where I got this really weird purple raised bump rash on my butt when I was young. I don't remember what age. I vaguely remember this. And then in eighth grade was a really weird year. I remember I was about to go on a vacation with my friend, and I had spent the night at her house, and I woke up and I literally could not open my jaw fully. It was really strange. I could barely fit two fingers in my mouth, and I just remember trying to figure out how to eat. I think we were having donuts or something that morning, because we had donuts a lot, and we were going on this cruise, and this whole time I was trying to figure out how to navigate this, and it was just the weirdest thing. My jaw was kind of locked into this weird place. And then also, I think it was the same year, I went on a trip with my grandparents, and I think we were in Georgia, and I got bit by like a spider or something, and it was like this itchy, burny, like bug bite, which was not super, like, I figured that was normal for a bug bite, you know? But the weird thing was, like, it went on for like a couple weeks, and I kid you not, like, if you're squeamish, don't watch this part of the video. But I still have like this like bump, right? Like this like cyst from this bug bite, and I've noticed like I had one like right here for a very long time that eventually like went down, and these were years later. But I've noticed that like sometimes when I get bug bites, I have that weird reaction where it'll form like this like cyst, and you know, like other people didn't experience that, not even in my family. So I was just like, this seems really strange. And so like from a young age, like I felt like there was always something like kind of wrong. I did get headaches back then, especially like after school, and I wore glasses, and so we kind of always just thought that it was related to my eyesight, and that I just needed like my prescription changed or what, you know, whatever. I also had like started really noticing, I think it probably started around middle school for me, but I had Raynaud's. I still have this, where like my fingers and my toes will turn like purple, blue, and even like white when they get cold. And by cold, I mean like it can be like 60 degrees out. This is not like frostbite weather, okay? So like there were always like these just like little things, and it was just like this, I feel like there has to be a connection between all of these, right? And so for me, I felt like I was constantly doing research, like just trying to figure out what was wrong. And like my kind of like approach in life has been, maybe this is just the way that I was raised, but also like in middle school, I was in a medical magnet program, and like my family has like medical professions, like one of my immediate family members does, and also like an aunt. And so like I've always had like an interest in how the body works. For a very long time, I wanted to go into the medical profession. I kind of like went back and forth between like nursing and like becoming an EMT or paramedic, and I actually took some like beginner coursework in emergency medicine to do that. That's a whole other story. I mean, obviously I'm not doing that today. And like I'm grateful in retrospect that I'm not, because I don't think my body would have handled that kind of job well. But all that to say, like I've always had an interest in the body and in health and kind of understanding what's going on. And so I was always just like kind of fascinated, but also curious and a little concerned, like, because, you know, like I've learned that with any kind of medical condition, it's always better to catch it early. Like prevention is always better, kind of thing. And like I was like young when a lot of this was developing or like, you know, happening, and so I just didn't know what to make of it. And you know, I had other like immediate family members who would go through things too, but there was never really an obvious connection between you know, our different symptoms. And so anyways, going forward to around 2016 is when things like really started to get a little wacky. And this is when I had moved out to California, been living out there about 2 years, and I was working a lot. I was nannying for 2 different families, which it was my first time nannying, and it was exhausting. And at that time I had I'd always been pretty active growing up. I was in dance, I was in swimming, cross country. I was never like an exceptional athlete by any means. Like I was like close to like slowest, if not the slowest on the cross country team, but I loved it because, I love trees. I like the outdoors, and like I really saw it as an opportunity to like encourage other people and to encourage myself. And I just enjoyed being active. And so I carried that with me when I went to California. I had actually gotten into, if anybody out there has done the P90X series, which honestly, that was the best shape I've ever been in my life. Like just before going to California, because I was actually training to kind of build up my body, build up my strength for becoming a paramedic. And so I was in really good shape. And then I went out to California. I stuck with running. It was absolutely gorgeous. I absolutely loved running in the mountains, and it's just like a runner's paradise out there. Like, let me just say that. And that was also part of my kind of like meditation, my spiritual practice, and how I like encouraged myself. I would listen to like worship music, Christian music as I was running, or just, like motivational music. And so that was my thing. I loved it. And so I also did kind of like strength training, just kind of like general body strength kind of exercises, push-ups, sit-ups, that kind of thing. And so I was still really active. And then I was struggling to find like full-time work out there. And so that's why I got these 2 nannying jobs, which was, I bit off more than I could chew there. But I was working like around 55 hours a week, and like things just started getting like nuts. Like and by that I mean like my body was not, it was like I was having these attacks where I would feel like I would get clammy. All of a sudden I would have like this sense of like doom, like it felt like I was having a heart attack. And I was scared that I was having a heart attack, especially from the EMS training I'd had. I was terrified. And so I knew that like this was not a good thing. And like I would get like dizzy. I would feel like I was gonna pass out. Like I would get clammy. And like at that time, like food wise, I was also eating a diet that was like vegan and gluten-free. I do not recommend going that extreme unless your doctor tells you to. I didn't have health insurance at the time, and I was trying to figure out my gut issues. And so gluten-free for me, I was gluten-free for about 11 years, and I was vegan for about 3.5. So that didn't last too long. But, I'm grateful in certain ways for that experience of going gluten-free and vegan. That really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I felt like it did like improve my health in certain ways in the short term. I did feel like I had more energy. I felt like my skin cleared up. It gave me like a whole new like love for produce that has stuck with me, and just like wanting to be creative with food. So that was like a really interesting thing. But all that to say, I think that could have also played into these attacks that I was having. I was eating a crazy amount of beans, which is also not good for your digestive system, the amount that I was eating. I was eating a lot of bananas and potatoes, and by that I mean I would eat like 2 or 3 at once in the evenings, just because I was trying to maintain my weight. because I was like doing these intense workouts. I was running like in the mountains, and so I wanted to make sure that I had maintained my weight, and that was the best way I knew how. And so I was also drinking a lot of licorice tea at that time because I was singing as part of a worship team, and so I was drinking a lot of licorice tea. I was also drinking caffeinated coffee, which I have learned is a big no-no for me, and cocoa, which I switched to because I realized that the cocoa affected me less than the caffeine. So, but I still needed some kind of like energy boost at times, and also just the mood boost. That was nice. But yeah, so I think that may have played into my symptoms, these like attacks as well. I'll get into that maybe in another video when I talk more about periodic paralysis. But that was terrifying. And I also noticed that, like, so little anecdote, one time I was out running, and I got back to my car and I was cooling down, like stretching, that kind of thing, and all of a sudden it felt like my clothes were being like tightened around my chest, and I had never experienced that before. So I was just like trying to peel off my sweatshirt because it had been a cool day, like a very cool morning, so I'd been wearing a sweatshirt, and so I just felt like I had to get out of my sweatshirt and like cool off. So that was really scary. And then like I noticed that like when I would drive up into the mountains, like if I was just going for a fun drive and like wanted to stop off and like see the view at those, the little, I don't know what you call those, the little places you can park along the mountain to like just take in the view, that like I would have these attacks as I like went up in elevation. And so that was really scary because then I'm like, I had to wait until it passed before I felt safe to drive. So anyways, that was scaring the heck out of me. So I went to an urgent care, and this was not during an attack. But like I knew from the EMS training that I'd had that, like I just wanted to get it checked out. And I knew that there were limitations. Like if you're truly having a heart attack, my understanding is that that's not going to show up on an EKG unless you're actively having an attack. And similarly for like other kind of heart issues, not all, but like anyway, so I went to an urgent care, and the doctor kind of listened to me like for it was a very, very, very brief appointment. He was like, have you been under a lot of stress? And like, what does your lifestyle look like? That kind of thing. And he was like, he literally listened to my heart for 2 seconds and then was like, you're having panic attacks. And I was just like, I don't think that's what's happening. And I was so angry. Like another component of this that I forgot to mention was that like it was happening like in line with my, like I would have more intense attacks with like right before my period. And so to me it felt like there was a like hormonal component potentially. And in my family we have hypothyroidism. I had not been diagnosed, but I thought that might be playing into it as well. And so I was so angry. Like I was already very leery of any doctor like straight up saying that it was like purely psychological. And I just was very uneasy about that. for a lot of reasons. And so I went to a second urgent care literally like the same day because I was so upset. I like remember I called my mom. I was talking. I'm like, how can they just like in a 5-minute appointment, they didn't even like do a workup, like no blood work. Like he gave me a list of psychologists, which I didn't have health insurance at the time. So that wasn't happening. And gave me a prescription for Xanax, which I had heard was a extremely powerful drug. And I was like, I know that I'm already very sensitive to medication. There's no way in hell I'm like trying this Xanax. Like, mm-mm. So anyways, I went to another urgent care and they're like, okay, like what do you want us to do? And they were very respectful. Like they understood my situation. I was very straight up with them. I'm like, I just feel really uneasy because like they didn't run an EKG or anything. And I may not have like understood the like the EKG thing. I don't know. But anyways, I was just like, can you make sure my heart is okay? And like, can we do like maybe a thyroid panel just to make sure like this isn't like thyroid related? And so they did both of those, and those came back normal. And so I was like relieved, but not. I was just a little bit more unnerved. I'm just like, okay, like what is this? And so anyways, like it kept like getting worse. Like it was just like I ended up quitting my nannying jobs and moving back home, which my amazing mom like had a room ready for me at her house and everything, and was just like ready to bring me home. And I was really like grateful for that. And that was a relief. And like my mom was a nurse, so like I also felt a little bit relieved that like there was somebody else there, like in worst case scenario situation that could help. So anyways, that was the end of 2016. Came home at the end of 2016. Went back to working with my employer that I had been working with before I left to go to California, and started to realize that there were just certain aspects of that job that were increasing my stress level. And like my symptoms were such at this point that I couldn't handle stress like of any kind. Like it just felt like I was having a physiological reaction to stress. And like I couldn't watch scary movies. Like I was literally watching the Hallmark Channel. Thank God for the Hallmark Channel. Like Hallmark Channel really got me through those days. But I ended up quitting that job. And so I didn't have a job, didn't have health insurance, and had all these crazy symptoms. Got in touch with my gynecologist. He was like, yeah, this might be hypothyroidism. Now this was like a very like, I don't even remember if there was an appointment. I think he was just like talking to me over the phone, and like ordered a prescription of Synthroid for me to see if that would help. And it was a very, very low dose. And so I started the Synthroid. That seemed to like start helping. And so I was like, okay. And in the meantime, I was like researching like adrenal fatigue, like all these things, because I just felt like so burned out and like befuddled by what was going on. And at the same time, like I had these other symptoms that were coming up, like I was feeling like internal vibrations. So I would go to church, and we had an amazing worship team, and like part of what I loved about this church was like the music was just immersive. Like you would come into the room, and it was just, you're completely immersed in the worship experience. And I loved that. But like it was so crazy because I would go into this, and it was like, it felt like, you know that feeling like where you're stopped at a railroad track, and the train is going through, and you can feel the bum 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 bum. Like it felt like that, but like in my body. And like if I pulled up to another car at a stoplight and they happened to be playing like a music with a heavy bass, I would get that sensation again. And so then I sorry, I'm losing track of my thought process there. But yeah, I was also having like sleep issues at that time. I would wake up to pee. I would wake up like randomly, like I couldn't figure out why I was waking up. I didn't feel anxious at all. Like I was just waking up at like the same time, like every morning. And I don't think it was because of the time change. Like this was fairly long into like my time back home. But I was getting like maybe 5 hours of sleep a night, between like 5 and 6 probably hours of sleep. And so I constantly felt tired. I couldn't tolerate exercise, which was like one of the most difficult things to deal with for me. Because the normal thing that I would do to like deal with stress was I'd go for a run, listen to some music, but I couldn't tolerate music. I couldn't tolerate running. I was lucky if I could go for a walk. And I, living in Florida, it's very hot and humid during the summer. Oh, that was something I also forgot to mention. When I was in California, the AC in my car broke while I was nannying, while I had these nannying jobs. And part of my job was to shuffle these kids back and forth. So was driving in the California heat. Thank God one of the parents allowed me to borrow one of their vehicles. Like, she was a saint. And also like a nurse practitioner cardiologist lady. So she was helping me kind of like try to wrap my brain around what was happening. And she thought it was like potentially Prinzmetal's angina. That's a whole other thing I'll get into with the migraines and meds for that. That was interesting. But anyways, where was I going with this? The AC in my car broke. So, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm like really losing my train of thought. Oh, the summer heat in Florida. Okay, so I get back to Florida. I have no AC in my car. I'm driving, back and forth to my job. I don't think at this time I was working full time. I think I was working part time, and before I quit my job, and or at least it was like kind of like hybrid. And this was before COVID, so impressive. Good for my employer for like doing that. But like the heat was really getting to me. And so I would try to like exercise, I would try to go on runs, and I just could not tolerate it. And I would notice that like when I well, I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, so I'm sorry. Trying to figure out where my brain was going with all this. It was just a rough time. I'll say that. It was a really rough time. On top of this, like in the news, like all of these great, amazing people were like committing suicide, and my sister was literally trying to guard me from the TV. She was like, do not turn on the TV, do not do this, because she knew I couldn't handle the stress. And like I was having like all these weird sensory issues. I was getting like sensory overload like all the time. I was getting like burning sensations in my hands. Like I would get this weird feeling like in my palms, like literally in the middle of my palms, I would get like pain right there. And then I would get like pain like right like here in my arms. It was this strange, it was like always the same place, but it was really strange. And like so I'm gonna go to my notes now because I'm losing my train of thought. Okay, yeah, so didn't have health insurance, was stressed out by everything, like had major sensory issues, was sensitive to sound, sensitive to light. Like I had these weird occasions where like I would have like a sudden like mood shift, and it just felt like all of a sudden everything was bad. And like physically I would feel like somebody had just put this like heavy blanket like on my head. Like that's what it physically felt like there was an actual physical feeling to it. And like everything would feel bad, and like in those moments I was just like praying and like I don't know what's happening, like, but I was trying to separate myself as much as I possibly could from those bad feelings and telling myself this is just a feeling, it's gonna pass. But it was really scary. And so anyways, I got another job. I was extremely terrified to start, and this was a job that was a very part-time, one time a week, 4 hours a day, but because it was related to public health and I just felt like that was going to stress me out too much, I felt like I needed the most boring job ever. And thank God for this woman at Robert Half. She just like encouraged me. She's like, just try it, like just, you know, see like how you do. You know, it's a really great company, and thank God, because that is one of the best things ever that has happened. My manager there was amazing. She, you know, I was open about what was happening because like I figured she needed to know if like something did happen. And just from an availability standpoint, like I was telling her like I'm gonna do the best I can here. But this one day a week, like I don't know if I can go beyond that, you know, like I don't know what my body can handle. At the time I started making smoothies because I was driving back and forth to this job in my no AC car, and I found that the smoothies really helped with the heat. And so I would take those. I also decided to get a cooling vest, and it came with this like ice wrap neck thing. Those were lifesavers. And so I was like figuring out how to make this work, right? And gradually I built up the number of hours, like very gradually. They gave me more work to do. They built up the hours. I was still looking for other jobs because this was a temp agency that I was working with, and I didn't know if this was going to become full-time. And another opportunity arose, and I brought it up to my manager at this job, and they were like, well, I think we want to keep you. And so they did. And long story short, I am still with this company, and this is June, almost 5 years later. It'll be 5 years in June, and this is one of the best managers I'd ever had. She like listened and believed me about like what was happening, and like encouraged me, not only like tolerated, encouraged me to go to the doctor's appointments as they came up. And that was like so amazing. That was just what I needed at the exactly the right time. And but before I, you know, was brought on to you know, I was still temp, so I didn't have the benefits that, you know, I would as a employee. And so I still didn't have health insurance, and I was trying to figure out how to navigate these health issues just so I could manage and get back to my life, like, you know, like be able to have a full-time job again. And like it felt like so much of a barrier because like it was like just this catch-22 where like I needed the medical help, but I didn't have the health insurance. I needed it to help me do better my job, but I needed the full-time job to be able to have the health benefits to get me in a better place, you know? So that was really frustrating. And I remember calling this one hospital, and a really good hospital, and they have financial assistance. And so I called them up and I was like, hey, like I'm having these weird symptoms, and they have you fill out a form with your symptoms, and I think they give you a call back. And I got that call back and they were like, we're sorry, but like we're only offering financial assistance to those with rare diseases, and your symptoms don't seem like a rare disease. And I was so upset. I was so upset because it just felt like, okay, how am I gonna do this? Like, I don't know how to manage like these. I've just got to like go from day to day, literally, like figuring out how to deal with this. So by this point, I started like noticing that when I would get home in my no AC car, at the end of the day, I would be having muscle weakness in my legs, like as I was going up the steps into the house. And so I thought that was weird. And then I started having these attacks, especially when I would go into grocery stores, not only then, but I don't know what it was, if it was like something triggering me, but like I would have an attack where like it felt like half of my body was going paralyzed, or like having like really extreme weakness, and I would end up like relying on the cart to kind of like help me stay upright. And it was like my sensory, like I would be really sensitive to motion, and then like I don't, it's so hard to explain, like everything just felt weird, like otherworldly kind of weird, you know. And so that was really scary. And I eventually worked my way up to becoming full-time. This was like I think 10 months later, I ended up coming on as an employee at this company. And I was so relieved. There was a whole government stop work. We had a lot of government clients, so they weren't able to bring me on as early as they wanted to. That's a whole long story, but yeah, so I got the job, got health insurance, started like going to just like primary care physicians, trying to figure out what was up. And at this point I thought like maybe this is MS. Like I don't know, like I'm a white girl. Like I was around cigarette smoke when I was young. Other family members smoked. And like I seem to be having a lot of neurological symptoms. I'm having muscle weakness. I had started to notice when I went in the shower, I would get muscle weakness. And like I thought maybe those occasions where I felt like the occasion where I felt like I needed to take off my sweatshirt because I felt like I was like having clothes pulled around my chest. I experienced that in other situations where I was going from like a cool environment to a warm environment. Like if it was winter outside and I went into a heated car, I would experience that as well. And so I was like, I had read about that kind of thing happening in multiple sclerosis. And so that's what my best guesses were on at the time. And so I posed that to a GP that I went to, and she ran an ANA test for me that came back negative. And I think that was the first time I had an MRI, and that came back normal. And maybe it wasn't. I don't know if I had one back then. Anyways, and so I went to another GP, and she was like, this sounds like you have POTS. And I had never heard of POTS before, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And I was just like, I don't even know what that is. Like, that came up nowhere in my research. I didn't know what the heck that was. And so, yeah, so like we did the tilt table test that came back positive. I had never passed out before, so I was like, I had read up on the tilt table test, so I knew what they were trying to do. I knew what they were trying to provoke. And so I was pretty anxious about that. But it actually ended up being a huge relief. Like, the staff was super sweet. And like, for this test, my God, like, you gotta like fast and like not drink water. And neither of those things do my body like. No. So I'm already like, people have a really hard time finding veins on me, or like finding veins that don't roll, and it literally took like 5 people to get a vein on me that day, because I think they put in an IV in case like some kind of cardiac event does happen. It's just kind of like a just in case kind of thing. But they were super sweet. Very, very sweet. I think it took like the anesthesiologist, or like somebody who had been trained by an anesthesiologist, to be able to get a vein on me. And they did like these heat packs. Like, they warmed me up, and I got super woozy, and that was the last thing I remember, feeling super nauseous and woozy. Nausea had been a big thing for me as well. And I passed out, and it was like literally like I had nothing to be afraid of. Like, there was nothing, like, it was just like boop, and then they were like, I was, you know, waking up because they had put me back flat. So then I woke up, and then they're like, yeah, you passed out. And I was like, what? I did? And so it was a very surreal experience. But you know, I had been talking to one of the nurses, and she had pointed out something I had said, where I was talking about my like exercise intolerance, and I had noticed that if I worked out intensely, the next day I would be dizzy and like nauseous, and like it was like this pattern, like if I worked out, then the next day inevitably that would happen. And she pointed out, oh, like the next day, and I don't know what she was thinking. I wish I had asked. But that's always kind of like stuck out in my mind about that whole bit. But anyways, got my orange juice and pudding, and I was a happy camper, and I left that experience with a diagnosis of POTS and orthostatic hypotension. And so that was in 2019, June of 2019. Some other crazy things happened. I started getting floaters and flashes in my vision, started having dim vision. And so I went to the eye doctor, and he was like, you've got a retinal hole, and we need to get you to a retinal specialist like tomorrow so that you don't lose your vision. And he suspected multiple sclerosis. I had brought that up with him, and he was like, yeah, like that's a possibility. And so I still kind of had my mind on that, and I was really relieved to finally have, like, not that something was going wrong, but like that something was going wrong that like other people could see, because so much of what I had been experiencing prior to that was very sensory internal symptoms that like other people were not able to see. And so this finally was like a way for me to say to doctors, like, hey, like, you can see this, can you help me figure this out, kind of thing. So I was encouraged in that regard. And so then I had laser eye surgery. One of the most painful experiences I have ever experienced, to be honest with you, because I had a retinal hole in one eye. I think let me look at the technical words for this. Okay, so I had a retinal hole in the left eye, bilateral lattice degeneration, and vitreous detachment. And the doctor during this eye surgery, he, poor guy, like, we both like were, I think, baffled, because I just like I tend to think I can tolerate a lot of pain, and this was not a situation where I was tolerating the pain. Like, I was in tears And he had turned the power setting down to like the lowest possible setting, and they had numbed up my eyes with proparacaine. And I think like what I learned from that was, you know, looking back, was I think like I lack sensitivity to proparacaine. Like I don't know if I needed more than the typical person or what, but he was baffled, I was baffled, it was painful, but you know, I survived it, and here I am talking about it now. And I still get floaters. I don't get flashes anymore. I see a retinal specialist. She's amazing. And yeah, so I kind of look out for that. But I've had 2 eye doctors now suggest multiple sclerosis. And if it wasn't for my clear MRIs, you know, I would think otherwise. But I finally found a GP that I really liked, and asked if she could send me to somebody who specializes in multiple sclerosis. And she did, and this guy actually also specialized in migraines, and I actually got a diagnosis of migraines from that. And so that kind of helped put a lot of puzzle pieces together, although it took me a long time to really understand like what migraines can do. Like, it's really pretty amazing. Like, I would go on a walk and like have an episode where like everything would kind of appear curved, like I was looking through a glass, and like everything was like curved edges. I did get like these insane like pinching sharp pain headaches that would last. I think the longest one lasted was probably like a minute or 2, and like when I was in California, and that one literally brought me to my knees. It was so painful. Like, they're usually not that bad, but it's just like this very fast sharp pain that I'll get in my head sometimes. And I think that was part of the tip off that like I'd been getting migraines. I started to realize that like if I started to feel anxious or panic attacky, it was likely right before I was about to have a migraine. And like I had very kind of like atypical aura experiences, and I would explain like the muscle weakness to the doctor, and I started to think maybe I was having hemiplegic migraines. So I had started looking into that, and so that was kind of like really eye-opening and helpful. And so we started to try different medications, preventatives, abortives, because it started to become like a daily thing where I was getting headaches at the same time every day. And it was like I didn't have very much energy at all. By this time, like I was working almost full-time, I think like somewhere between like 27 and 32 hours a week, something like that. And so I was, you know, happy about that, but also like it was taking everything out of me. We had an open office. We had a lot of visual, sensory, auditory stimulation. There would be music playing. Like I would have to go back into like a booth corner and like just get away from like all of the sensory stuff. And I think we tried Tobamax, which was a very weird experience for me. We tried, what's the other one called? Ubrelvy. And there was, I think, one other, but I was scared to death, and I explained this to my doctor. I was scared to death to try any of the triptans because there had been the suggestion by this nurse practitioner who was amazing that maybe I was having Prinzmetal's angina. And when I did my research on Prinzmetal's angina, I was like, yeah, I mean, that kind of seems to fit my symptoms. Like the chest pain, which I don't think I mentioned that before, but like I was getting chest pain during these attacks, and like pins and needles in my arm. That's vital information I forgot to include. I'm sorry about that. when I was having these attacks that I was just told were panic attacks, I was getting the pins and needles in my arm and like chest discomfort kind of feelings. But yeah, so I was terrified to try any kind of triptans, and he even offered to give me like the softest version of a triptan, for lack of better phrasing, like the most mild version. And I was just like, I can't do it. Like I got the prescription, and then like when it came down to it, I was just like, can't do it. And so yeah, so other things that started happening, like I realized I was getting overheated at night. I would like have the covers on, and like if I got overheated, I noticed that I was having like ptosis, where my eyes would get really droopy. I would like wake up and like feel anxious, and then I would go eat something and I would feel better, and I thought maybe I was having like low blood sugar during the night or something. It was really strange. So I would wake up, go eat a boiled egg, and then come back to bed and I'd be fine. It was really weird. And then like I started having these episodes where if I slept on my back, I would like wake up either like choking or like gasping for air, and it would feel like my throat had collapsed. Like if I was laying on my back, it felt like it just like got closed off all of a sudden, and I couldn't breathe, and it was like my body was like trying to wake me up. I was having a lot of nightmares, I noticed, when I got overheated. So like my amazing mom got me a fan for the room, like for extra cooling, and so I was really trying to manage that aspect. I had been to an endocrinologist by this point, and we had ruled out any kind of thyroid issues. They actually recommended that I come off of the Synthroid because my blood work was normal, and I had started to have like a racing heart, and they were like, that could be because of the Synthroid. And so I came off of the Synthroid, and had like a lump in my breast. It turns out I have like super dense breasts. We do have like breast cancer in my family, not immediate family, but like extended family. And so that was a concern at one point. And so that was all like end of 2016 through 2019. 2020 comes along, and I ended up with 2 blood clots in one leg at the same time. And that was, concerning. I like went into the ER, and the doctor, I had for like 7 days or so, I had been having like cramping in my legs, which I had gotten like severe Charlie horses when I would do sports and such in school. Like especially at night, I would get like Charlie horses. And so like to me that wasn't super strange to me, but what was strange was like I was getting these like weird veiny kind of pains, like towards my ankle, and then I would get swelling. I would get swelling in my right foot and my right hand, and I'm like, I don't know. And I started reading up on blood clots, and I was like, maybe I should go get this checked out. And so the doctor in the ER like evaluated me, and he was like, it's probably not blood clots, but we'll check it just in case. And we did, and he came back, and he literally had his head bowed, and he was super, super kind guy, super sweet. I felt for him, but he came in with his head bowed, and he was like, you have 2 blood clots. And I was like, I was so baffled. I was just like, for one, like, I finally got a diagnosis right, like and then I was like, oh shit, like I have 2 blood clots in my body that could travel up to my heart. This is where like knowing the medical kind of side of things is a little terrifying, because I knew that it could travel up to my lungs. And so like the staff were kind of like panicking, and I was like, I'm gonna lay down so I don't pass out from this news. And so they were great, and that started my year-long adventure with Eliquis, which was nothing major there, but I ended up going. They wanted me to go see a hematologist after that. I started thinking I might have polycythemia vera. The hematologist said he didn't think that was that. We tested all kind of genetic things, couldn't figure it out, and so anyways, I'm still taking these migraine meds, and I'm asking that doctor, like, can migraines cause blood clots? And he's like, not that I'm aware of, like, and so we're all like just kind of scratching our heads like, what the heck is going on? By this point I had been evaluated by a different neurological team for like things like Ehlers-Danlos, which I didn't really know much about, and didn't know at that time that part of my family was thought to perhaps have Ehlers-Danlos. And so I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought again. Looking back at my notes. Yeah, so I got evaluated for Ehlers-Danlos, like very briefly during that, but like they didn't think that I had it, and was evaluated for fibromyalgia, and I didn't think I had fibromyalgia, and they were like, we don't, like, they were amazing. The fibromyalgia team was absolutely amazing at Mayo. That nurse took the most detailed notes and asked the most detailed questions of any practitioner that I have been to, and I was just floored by her. She was amazing. She asked about like the aspects of like certain types of pain, like whether it was dull, sharp, like how long it lasted. Like, it was phenomenal. And like they said, you technically you meet the criteria for fibromyalgia, but we don't think you have it. And I was like, yeah, I agree. I don't think I have fibromyalgia. I didn't have like widespread pain. It was just like these weird, like, sensory sharp pains that I would get in random places, like, but at the same places consistently. And so anyways, that's what I was going to say. I'm sorry, this went a little juxtaposed, but I was still on the migraine medication and didn't really seem to be helping the migraines. And I started having tics, which I didn't know were tics. I thought I was having seizures. It was scary. I was having motor and vocal tics. And so that was crazy. I had taken metoclopramide. It started after I took metoclopramide, and I thought maybe it was a reaction to that medication, but they were like, we don't think they would last this long. I learned CBIT from some YouTube videos, and that seemed to help. I was having tics like 6+ hours a day, and it was exhausting and definitely making it difficult to work. And yeah, so that was crazy. And then I totally forgot to talk about that. Yeah, so I'll wrap up with the tics part, and then I'll come back to that other one. But I went to a third neurologist, and she thought I was having tics, and she's like, but because you're having deja vu and because of this other symptom, if you still want to go through with like a 3-day in hospital VEEG to rule out seizures, we can do that. And I was like, by all means, let us please rule out seizures, because at this point I wasn't driving. My boyfriend, now husband, was driving me everywhere along with my family, and I really wanted to confirm that I wasn't having seizures. So I did a 3-day PEEG, and that came back negative. That was a experience in and of itself, which I won't go into too much detail. But that was where it was actually the resident and not the doctor who suggested that I was having complex tics, because he had seen it in other patients where he had been working. So that was helpful. What I was talking about before about like having the feeling like my throat was collapsing, around that same time, I also noticed that I would like at certain times go to get a drink of water, and when I would go to swallow, it would feel like I was choking, like I wasn't breathing, like things were getting cut off. And I know you don't normally breathe when you swallow, because that's not you don't want to breathe when you're swallowing, that's bad. But it just, something in my throat didn't feel right. And so I got evaluated by an SLP, which I can't remember the technical name for right now, but we did a mild barium swallow test, and it turned out that I had mild pharyngeal dysphagia with silent aspiration, generalized weakness with reduced base of tongue, reduced pharyngeal stripping wave, and reduced epiglottic inversion. So then I had what do you call it? Sorry, you guys, it's getting hot in here, and so I'm like I'm losing my train of thought pretty easily. I'm drinking coffee, which is probably not helping, but it's decaf, by the way, for those who might be worried. But yeah, so I did like speech therapy, is that what it is? Speech language therapy to strengthen my throat muscles. And they sent me home with like homework to do, which I'm supposed to do regularly, which I have not been great about lately, but it did help a lot. So now I'm supposed to, like, when I swallow, I'm technically supposed to tuck my chin like that when I swallow, so I don't aspirate. Aspirate is when fluid gets into your lungs, and that's not good. You don't want fluid in your lungs. That's not where it's supposed to be. So yeah, so the swallowing issues, the migraines, the blood clots, it was a crazy couple of years. And then the tics, yeah. My mom literally had to come in with me to appointments. I was over 30 years old. Like my mom was coming in with me. And we tried, I think that was when we tried the Topamax, and that was, I was getting weird sensory stuff with that. Things were feeling weird, like I was losing my appetite, and then like it would feel like my brain was being like sucked out of my neck, like with a vacuum. That was how it felt for me. And I know some people do really well with Topamax. It was not the best experience for me. But because I kept having migraines, and I started to notice that I was having like fluid like coming out of my ear, like not a lot, it just felt like this like thin layer of like clear fluid that I would get inside my ears, and I could feel it like internally, excuse me, trickling down. And I was like, oh my god, like, and I had started watching, excuse me, another YouTuber who had migraines, and she was learning about CSF leaks, and I was like, maybe that's what's up. And so I started to get concerned that I was having CSF leaks, and we're on to like possible diagnosis number 200, whatever at this point, you know? And so I started reading up on that, and went to an ear, nose, throat, and told them I was concerned about that, but I wanted to like see what their thoughts were. And they gave me a referral to a CSF leak specialist, and she is now my neurologist, and actually has worked wonders. I will get to that in a minute, but around the same time, because I was starting to suspect a CSF leak and I was starting to think about like the bigger picture of all of my symptoms, I was like, there's got to be like something causing all of this. Like, this is not just like random, random symptoms like this. Like, this just seems crazy. And I learned that, connective tissue disorders are associated with CSF leaks. And so I started looking into that, and I asked my dad, I was like, do we have in our family anybody with like Marfan syndrome or like Ehlers-Danlos or anything like that? Like, do we have any family history? And he thought that like the Marfan syndrome sounded familiar, and he asked that I reach out to another one of my family members. And it turned out that her kids were having significant symptoms, like getting out of bed, like they could roll their ankle. They were having like major dislocation issues and like other things where they had seen doctors and their doctors thought that they had Ehlers-Danlos. And I was like, oh my God, like this could be the puzzle piece. And so family history, really important, right? Like, talk to your family members. Please talk to your family members. And so at this point, I'm like asking, like I'm Facebooking all of my family members, and I'm like, have you ever had this? Have you ever had muscle weakness? Have you ever had this? And they're amazing. My family is amazing and supportive and willing to talk about those things. So I was only sad that I hadn't come to them sooner. So it turned out that the woman that specializes in CSF leaks is very familiar with Ehlers-Danlos, and so she prescribed a medication for me as a migraine preventative called venlafaxine, which is, the brand name is Effexor, XR, extended release, I think is what that means. Changed my life. Started sleeping, started having not so terrible mood swings, started having days without migraines. Oh my God, started having energy, like totally rocked my world. And there's some people that like have had bad experiences. Like, I was very grateful because she tapered me on, is that the right word? Tapered, titrate, I get those confused. But anyways, she brought me up in the dosage, like slowly, like over several weeks. And that was absolutely life-changing for me and amazing. And she, checked for a CSF leak with like I can't remember if it was a CAT scan or MRI or both. I think it might have been both. No signs of a CSF leak. And she broke it down to me. She showed me like where I have like, I think it's like disc issues that are indicative of, EDS. And I found a geneticist. And I think this might have been the point where I had joined like an Ehlers-Danlos Facebook support group. I had gone through a few Facebook support groups at this point, just trying to figure out what was going on. And I think they had recommended Dr. Atwal, or it was the rheumatologist. I had seen a rheumatologist, and we had been ruling out rheumatological things because like another doctor had said maybe I had like Sjogren's or scleroderma. So we were ruling those out, and he suggested this geneticist, and I saw the geneticist. He specializes in Ehlers-Danlos. And that's when I finally got my Ehlers-Danlos. So that was, February? Was that February? Yeah, February of 2022. I officially got the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis. And I know this video is running super long, a lot longer than I thought it would. But just kind of a quick, like, where I am now. Because I was still having like these episodes of muscle weakness, and they had started to become both sides, and I was having breathing issues actually during them as well. We looked into myasthenia gravis, like the EMGs were coming back normal, but I was having breathing issues, and that was a concern for me. And so we tried asthma medication. The asthma medication actually triggered the muscle weakness attacks. And so in my own research, I learned that periodic paralysis is actually a possible cause of that, and it's actually fairly common in people with Ehlers-Danlos. They're looking into the possible, researchers are looking into the connection there, and that's something I want to do a video on. But yeah, so that's where I currently am. I got diagnosed with FND because of the muscle weakness. I am a little skeptical of that diagnosis still. I am trying to embrace it in a way that is helpful for me, and the ways that have been helpful for me are going to physical therapy. Not that the physical therapy has helped the muscle weakness, but just because the physical therapy has helped my posture. So I don't know, like, I can understand why I got diagnosed with a functional neurological disorder. And again, I want to do another video on that because it's a whole topic. It's a whole topic. And especially like with other possibilities like periodic paralysis and the possibility of having both. That makes it complicated. So I am currently scheduled for an appointment with a specialist, a neurologist who specializes in periodic paralysis. I think that it could be, like, periodic paralysis has these subtypes like hypokalemic, hyperkalemic, and Anderson to Will syndrome. I think based on like family history, my symptoms, and our physical characteristics, I think it could be like Anderson to Will syndrome. But I don't know. So that's where I'm currently at. I actually put in an amendment to have functional neurological disorder removed from my medical records, just because I don't feel like the basis of that diagnosis was like, how do I explain this? I don't like I was diagnosed with FND based on what I was told was a genuflective gait, which I have yet to find in any kind of literature. Not to say that it doesn't exist, but like I've heard and read in the literature that it can be very easy to misdiagnose abnormal gaits, which I get abnormal gaits when I have the muscle weakness, especially during severe attacks. And I was also told it was based on like negative periodic paralysis genetic testing and negative EMG, which those are whole other stories, but long story short, you can't rule out periodic paralysis based on those. And I do think that my symptoms fit the diagnostic criteria for Anderson to Will. So we'll see. That's a whole other adventure to come. And that's, I think, in June. So it'll be some time before I'm able to speak more to that. I'm having genetic testing done for like mitochondrial diseases and like certain gene mutations that like the original genetic testing that I had for periodic paralysis doesn't include. I'm hoping to explain that in more detail in another video too, because that can get kind of complicated. But anyways, yeah, so I'm having genetic testing done currently and seeking out the periodic paralysis diagnosis. So it's been real. Like, on top of that, I've had like some abnormal blood work where I've had elevated hematocrit, elevated hemoglobin, elevated neutrophils, and low lymphocytes somewhat consistently. I've had elevated DHEA sulfate, which I was told like that could just be nothing. Like, some people have that and they don't know why, but it's not like necessarily indicative of anything. I had low C-peptide at one point, and I think those were like the things that stuck out to me. But I'm not a doctor, so I can't, interpret those very well. But yeah, so that's my story of the diagnostic journey, still on it. But I am really grateful to be at a point where I can even make this video, where I'm functional enough to be able to make this video. Like, if I had done this a couple years ago, I probably would have, like, not been able to do it because I probably wouldn't have the mental capacity to do it, but also, like, the physical energy to be able to do it. So I'm really grateful to be where I am. And if you're on your diagnostic journey, let me know where you're at in that. And like, if any of this was helpful, let me know. If there's any like specific area that you want me to like dive into that could be helpful, just let me know in the comments, and I'll consider like making a video about it. Sometimes like it's more beneficial for me to just leave a comment so that you can kind of have a next step and maybe more information that you can look into. But I say that because like I'm not a doctor and I'm not a specialist, and I don't want to make like videos that misinform. So I would rather you go to a resource that is written by a doctor or by some kind of medical professional. And yeah, so take all this with a grain of salt. I hope it is helpful in some way to you. And just let me know in the comments what you would like to see, if you have specific questions about the diagnosis journey, or if you have interest in a specific area, let me know. And thanks for listening if you have made it this far. Bye.